Hi everyone, and welcome to the last week. For this last week, you're going to be reading chapters 14 and 15, which is going to be focusing on the role of monetary policy and the Fed. You'll notice that the Fed is very important to our economy because of the control of the level of interest rates. The level of interest rates control a lot of the things that we do in our economy. And the key thing with interest rates is people spend money on the changes in interest rates. So for this week, we have chapters 14 and 15. You have the devotion. You have the monetary policy discussion board, which your first post is due by Wednesday and 2 peer responses due by Saturday night. You have the 2 quizzes for 14 and 15, and then you have the chapter 6 homework. Week 6 homework that we're going to go over. And then after this, the course is finished. But I really want to appreciate all your efforts in the course. It's been a very enjoyable course, and I think you've been able to apply a lot of key concepts in terms of what we learned in the course to help you do well. So let's look at a couple things. Why do banks maintain little excess reserves as possible? In this question, you want to focus on that banks only make money off of the money that they loan out. So they don't like to carry a lot of excess reserves because that's money that they're not loaning out. So that's what you want to focus on. Question 2, why did China raise the reserve requirements? How did they expect consumers and businesses to respond? So when you raise the reserve requirements, that means less money is able for banks to lend out. So that means consumers and businesses are not able to borrow as much money because banks are holding back money that they're able to lend out. Why might the Fed want to decrease the money supply? So if the money supply decreases, you'll notice that this will cause higher interest rates. And two reasons why the Fed might do this is higher interest rates cause consumers and businesses to spend less money. There could be inflation in the economy, or there could be an inflationary gap. Question 4. In 2008, the Fed reduced both the discount and federal funds rate dramatically, but bank volume did not really increase. What considerations might have constrained the market's response to the Fed policy? One of the main considerations was a credit freeze, where banks were not lending any money at all. And they were not lending money because of many of the restrictions that were applied in the market. So banks were very nervous about lending money. And so even though the restrictions were reduced, banks were not willing to lend very much money. And the Fed cannot really directly influence how banks spend their money or lend money. This question right here, you're looking at the role of M1. M1 includes traveler's checks, checkable deposits, and currency. Question 6 is how large are the required reserves? So to find this question out, you want to take the total reserves and you want to look at how much money is in the bank. And the reserve requirement is 20%. Question 7 is looking at the conditions of the banking system. How large is the excess reserves? After the required reserves are met, how much money is left over? That's the excess reserves. Question 8 is looking at the conditions of the banking system. How much money could this bank increase the lending? So you want to look at how much lending is possible for the bank. After the money that's held by the bank, how much can they lend out? Question 9 is just looking at an example from page 306 in your book. Question 10, why do high interest rates affect the demand for housing but have little influence on the demand for pizzas? Housing demand is focused on interest rates because people have to borrow money, but they do not have to borrow money to buy pizza. Question 11, if the Federal Reserve Banks mailed everyone a brand new $100 bill, what would happen to prices? So you know there would be inflation, and given that there'd be inflation, people would buy more, and people would have higher incomes. But you want to look at the equation MV equals PY. MV equals PY, and how will it influence that equation? Question 12. Why were banks reluctant to use their lending capacity in 2008? So one of the main reasons why they would not focus on their lending requirements in 2008. They did not want to lend money because they were already burned by bad mortgages. So they did not want to lend money at that point. So what happens were banks were gaining a lot of deposits, but they were not lending money. Question 13. If mortgage rates fell to 0%, why might consumers still hesitate to borrow money to buy a home? One of the reasons why is the home prices might actually decrease. So why borrow money to buy a house if home prices will decrease? Question 14 is looking at this interest rate. If mortgage interest rate is 7%, approximately how many homeowners paying in annual mortgage interest? So you want to look at that question. The other questions right here are focused on problem sets in the book as well. But if you have any questions, please let me know. But all your work will be due by Saturday night, and I look forward to your effort. And I know that if you can focus your effort on what is required, that you will do well, as I appreciate all you've done in the course to enlighten yourself with the role of economics and your analysis. But I wish you the best.